I'm not ashamed.
What was Jesus teaching in the parable of the wedding feast? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of Matthew on walking through the Bible.
Word the glory of his cross.
As this is our first episode of 2019, we'd like to wish you all a happy new year and pray that you will either begin or will continue serving the Lord this year. If you have a Bible with you, you can turn to Matthew chapter 22. We're going to be reading from verses 1 to 14. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So, Matthew chapter 22, beginning at verse 1. And Jesus answered and spoke to them again by parables and said, The kingdom of heaven is like a certain king who arranged a marriage for his son, and sent out his servants to call those who were invited to the wedding. And they were not willing to come. Again he sent out other servants, saying, Tell those who are invited, See, I have prepared my dinner. My oxen and fatted cattle are killed, and all things are ready. Come to the wedding. But they made light of it, and went their ways, one to his own farm, another to his business. And the rest seized his servants, treated them spitefully, and killed them. But when the king heard about it, he was furious, and he sent out his armies, destroyed those murderers, and burned up their city. Then he said to his servants, The wedding is ready, but those who were invited were not worthy. Therefore go into the highways, and as many as you find, invite to the wedding. So those servants went out into the highways and gathered together all whom they found, both bad and good. And the wedding hall was filled with guests. But when the king came in to see the guests, he saw a man there who did not have on a wedding garment. So he said to him, Friend, how did you come in here without a wedding garment? And he was speechless. Then the king said to the servants, Bind him hand and foot, take him away, and cast him into outer darkness. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. For many are called, but few are chosen. In our last episode at the end of 2018, we completed Matthew 21 with the parable of the vineyard, sometimes referred to as the parable of the wicked vine dressers. Following that parable, the chief priests and Pharisees wanted to lay their hands on Jesus in order to throw him in jail or perhaps kill him, but they didn't because they feared the people. In Mark's account of this parable in Mark 12, we find that afterwards the chief priests and Pharisees left. So combining this with Matthew's account, it may be that this parable is told at a different time of the day on the Tuesday before Jesus' crucifixion. However, even if this was the case, Jesus is still teaching a similar lesson to that found in Matthew 21, namely the coming kingdom and who would be in it. Jesus begins the parable with, The kingdom of heaven is like. When we have found this phrase in Matthew, it is referred to Christ's coming kingdom, which is the church that Christ is currently reigning over. In this case, the kingdom of heaven is like a king who arranged a marriage for his son. The king in this parable is God the Father, and the Son is Jesus Christ. The marriage that was arranged was between Christ and his church. God the Father sent out his servants, the prophets, to call those who were invited to come to the wedding, but they wouldn't come. God then sent out other prophets to Israel, telling them to come to the wedding, but again they wouldn't come. The last of these prophets was John the Baptist, one who was rejected of the Jews in general and then killed. In fact, this is how generally many of the prophets were treated, for many were either rejected and or killed. Who were the invited guests? They were the Jews, including the chief priests, Pharisees, and elders. When the king heard at how they treated his servants, he was furious and went and destroyed those murderers and burned their cities. If the Jews were going to reject God's Son and kill his prophets, then God would not accept them. He would reject them, not because of who they were, but because of what they had done. The king in the parable said that those invited guests were unworthy to come to the wedding, which is exactly what the Apostle Paul later says of the Jews in Acts 13:45 and 46. He then told his servants to go out to the highways and find as many as you can to invite to the wedding. Who would these people be? The Gentiles, which is what we find happening in the book of Acts. For in large part, the Jews rejected the gospel of Christ, while in larger numbers, the Gentiles obeyed it. So now we have the hall filled with guests, and the king comes in to find a guest not wearing a wedding garment. According to my research, in Bible times, when you were invited to a wedding given by a king for his son, you would not wear your own wedding garment, but would wear one provided to you by the king. So when the king asked why he wasn't wearing a wedding garment, it wasn't that the man was too poor or didn't know that he needed a wedding garment. It was that he deliberately refused to wear what the king had provided. With this being the case, the king commanded the servant to cast this man into outer darkness, where there would be weeping and gnashing of teeth, which is hell. What is Jesus saying here? Today, God commands all people to believe in his Son, repent of their sins, confess Jesus as the Son of God, be baptized for the remission of their sins, and live a godly, faithful life until death. If we fail to do this, then we don't have on the proper wedding attire, and even though we may have been invited to the wedding and come, in other words, became a Christian and joined Christ's church, God will cast us into hell for our disobedience. Jesus concludes by saying that many are called, but few are chosen, meaning that many will be called by the gospel, but the vast majority won't obey it. Only those few who will be in heaven forever. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion in Matthew 22, verses 15 to 22, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time.
I'm not ashamed.
Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.
Of his cross.